Final Stop Brazil, Book 2, Life After Hell, Chapter 49. My dear substitute mom, Italva, a happy Sunday. Geo was like any other Baiano, a liar, false, safado. There was no more conversation. Again and again he consoled me, and it was obviously uncomfortable to him even when he accidentally ran into each other in front of his house. He avoided me and hid when he knew I was with Daniel Marcio, a behavior of adolescent boys, but not of a supposedly grown man. It was over and done without a word. No reason, just like that. The Dia dos Namorados I spent, how should it be different, alone, crying my eyes out. But the day before was very nice, at least until the evening. Italva and Icaro came to visit me and were quite delighted by my small house, the furniture and all the trimmings. They met Pirata, and so Italva was finally not worried about me anymore. She brought me glasses, a cooking pot, a flower, and, hard to believe, what she was doing for me, a check of 90 reais to buy the gas bottle I needed so badly. The night before, Leo and I had a peaceful, almost affectionate conversation with each other. On this occasion, I had asked him if he minded that I came with my mom and my irmãozinho to the restaurant. I knew Italva still wanted to meet him. Leo was happy about it and even gave a lot of effort when I introduced him. He showed himself from his best side, like a good son-in-law. He agreed totally with Italva that I was very stubborn, and in their opinion I had some peculiar eating habits. Italva was quite impressed with Leo, and now convinced that I did not hang around with every vagabond type. Your Leo looks so very handsome, and has style and manners, very well. When he pulled me into his arms before we left in front of Italva and Icaro, and gave me a kiss on the cheek, I was deeply convinced that we would approach again, and all would turn out right. Later that night, I called him to invite him for a drink. Leo, I feel so alone. Let's just drink and something and talk. No, he refused with the reason that he was in a cyber cafe. But he told me where he was, asking me the same time to help him understand a little more of informatics, because he had bought a computer. I still let him know that I was on my way before my credit was finished. Who, however, wasn't in the cyber cafe when I arrived was Leo. Severely disappointed, I returned again. Did I misunderstand something? I considered recharging my phone, aimed towards the store right next to Leo's house, as a young man came outside. I asked if Leo was at home. He denied, but called him immediately, asked him where he was, and Leo replied that he was in the cyber cafe. The two talked quietly for a moment with each other, so I didn't understand. Then the young man told me that Leo was not in that cyber cafe where I had been, but down the road in another one. Once there, I realized that this was closed. So Leo had finally made it. With this act, he destroyed all the feelings I had for him. It was pointless. I was probably better off alone. I didn't want to suffer anymore, and the wound inflicted by Leo had long not healed. In addition, the disappointment with Geo, which was no less painful. It was just too much. I had to concentrate on myself and continue to fight for a working permit. My desire to work in the hotel had faded since I had hardly anything to do anymore. More and more grew my suspicion that our boss, in fact, not wanted to part with his hotel. Whenever a serious person showed interest to buy or an estate agent offered help, he never called them back or ignored it altogether. I received some stupid tasks that seemed more like occupational therapy than serious creative work. I never got a contract of him, contrary to his promises. Apparently, he couldn't give me a contract because I had no visa and thus no CPF. But exactly, the contract would have helped me a lot. He could have helped me anyway, if only he had wanted to. I didn't even need a contract. A simple acknowledgement that he needed me because of my multilingual knowledge. It would have been for me a lot easier. In any case, I would fight alone for a working permit. Also, I thought about purchasing some small pet because I could hardly stand this loneliness anymore. In the night, I cried myself to sleep, and in the morning, I woke with a terrible emptiness I could hardly bear. In the CAB, it was again recommended I consulted a state-paid lawyer, so I agreed with a date. In the evening, I went to see Tanya. We took coffee together. Secretly, I still hoped to meet Joe, but he didn't show up anywhere. Even Tanya had noticed that he was regularly seen on the road, outside his house or in the neighborhood, but only if I was not around. I would have needed him so much. It was not about the sex with him. Much more important was the feeling to go to sleep in his arms and wake up again, the feeling of not being alone. Tanya and I were becoming distant. I was still irritated because of Joe and got on Tanya's nerves with it. She couldn't understand, like anyone else, why it was so hard for me to be alone. She could not understand. She didn't know my past. Then on Sunday, Joe suddenly stood in front of me when I walked towards Tanya's place, and he stepped out of his door, his eyes full of guilty conscience. I approached him and asked him sarcastically again whether it was over between us or if we were still together. Again he answered, "Yes, we are together." He would talk to me, but not that day. "Joe, I give you all the time, but don't put me up all the time. You already have made me an idiot here in the street." Spontaneously, I took a step toward him and kissed him. He looked around furtively, as he was concerned that someone might see us. He didn't care before. "Is it unpleasant for you if someone sees us?" I provoked him, but got no answer. "We are talking tomorrow," he said. "How, Joe?" "If I'm at home, you cannot just come inside. The gate is closed, and I have no bell. To call me, you don't even get the idea. But I'll call you tomorrow, I promise." Of course, he didn't. But on this Sunday, I was doing relatively well, because I still had some hope that everything would be fine. With good spirits, I took breakfast with Tanya and Marcio. Tanya suspected that Joe's friends were inciting him with talks like what he wanted with a woman older than he. Tanya told me that he was used of his friends as a front man when they went out together. He looked so smashing, and of course his dancing aroused attention from women, and thus it was he who ripped the women for his friends, and this his friends would not allow to be spoiled. I could not understand all this, because ultimately Joe was a grown man of 30-something years, who should be able to make his own decisions. But I didn't want to spoil the day with this idea, and stuck to my conviction that we would meet and talk the next day. Tanya warned me, "He will not come. It's over. Get used to that idea, and don't go running after him. Withdrawing yourself is the best chance that he comes back to you. Don't even take notice of him. With that, the Bayanos can't cope at all. But forget it for now. He's just too cowardly to tell you that it's over. They are like this, the Bayanos." It gave me a sting what Tanya said, and I was mad at her, but I didn't say anything. Didn't want to believe what she said anyway. This Sunday, Italva, Icaro, and I were invited by Angela for the inauguration of the new house. I went shortly over to see Liege. Hadn't seen her a long time, and it was a very happy reunion. Rita, her daughter-in-law, served me caldo de camarão, shrimp soup, very tasty, with a glass of red wine, because she was preparing muqueca, fish crab stew, spicy. Somehow I belonged to Lietz's family, and should have stayed for lunch, which I would have loved to do, but unfortunately I was invited to Angela, and there I regretted even more that I could not enjoy the food of Liege and Rita. Angela's food was below anything, but the new house was very beautiful and huge. She showed me what would have been my room, nicely furnished with a private bathroom. But as I previously knew, there was not even a shop in this place, and continuing to play the daughter of the house, I had no more desire. On the other hand, I would not have the worries that I had now, with acquisitions and the surprisingly expensive cost of living. I was not at all sure whether it was worth it to move to Itinga. Danilo was particularly pleased to see me again. Somehow, he also had been for me like a little brother. We always got along great, and I missed him somehow. All agreed, however, that my new hair color was suiting me very well, that I appeared prettier and younger with it. I didn't want to be the blonde Alema anymore, who was especially noticed by men immediately. Until now, I got to know many men, but only because of my hair and eye color. My inner values no one was interested in, and the women here looked at me as if I was stealing their men. So I dyed my hair dark, spontaneously, but for my taste it was still not dark enough. In the afternoon, Italva and I walked to the beach of Ipitanga, very close to Angela's house, where I was supposed to meet with Tanya, Marcio, and a clique of their friends. Domino was played on the beach, one of the favorite pastimes of the Brazilians, together with plenty of booze. This time, instead of beer, it was vodka and cola. Nobody really understood that I kept myself out of that business, but I just don't like beer or vodka. Out of courtesy, I drank a beer sometimes, but it was not really my world. I had already noticed that here in Bahia, most people were drinking during the weekends from morning to night, from Friday night until Sunday evening. The people really had nothing else or better to do. Really terrible. With this I could not identify myself. In the evening, we went back by bus to Itinga. As always, Tanya and Marcio invited me yet to come with them. In the street we met my boys, Raphael and Ada, my favorites of all the children. Whenever I was at Tanya's place, the boys were there also. Marcio put on a CD with his typical Bahia noise they called music. Ada began to dance. I watched him, how he was already doing very well with his 13 years. Sure, these children grew up with that music. After I had watched the steps, I joined the dancing. Now Ada showed me properly how to do it, and suddenly everyone was dancing. The neighbors and children of the neighborhood stood at the door and windows to watch the crazy Alema dancing to the Pagode de Bahia. I was in a very good mood, and thought to myself, what a shame that Geo doesn't see me. My buffer I got, however, when I was on my way home. Ada accompanied me, as often, until the end of the street, and we walked arm in arm, when I saw Geo outside this door. Of course, he must have heard the loud music. When he saw me with Ada, he retreated into the house and slammed the door practically in my face. Monday I cried my eyes out again. Until the last minute I had believed that Geo would come. How much more did I have to endure? First Leo, then Geo. Both of them never gave me an explanation why it was over. It damned hurt. I withdrew myself from Tanya and Marcio. Didn't want to be the fifth wheel on the wagon anymore. Somehow I gave Tanya the blame for my situation. It was her telling me all those good stories about Geo, presenting him to me. She had let me run into the trap because I believed her that Geo was so different than most Baianos. After 4 years, this disappointment was more than I could cope with. But no one understood this. My self-esteem suffered greatly these days. Of course, I asked myself, what's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? In order to polish it up again, I started a hot flirt with a black bus driver who was, as I thought, even more handsome than Geo. He never took his eyes off me. Instead of keeping them on the road, he had his eyes permanently in the rear-view mirror. What did I have to lose? I could not and did not want to be alone, and as long as I drew attention to me, I utilized it. I scribbled a note with a short text, "Look at the road and not at me. I would not necessarily want to end up in the ditch, because you only look in the rear-view mirror. You can call me if you like. My number..." but please let me live a little longer." Before I got off, I handed him the note. Finally, a bit better humored, I went to work. But there my mood, of course, disappeared when I sat back in the fridge, like every day. The disrespect and ruthlessness was actually a reason to give notice. But I sat in the trap and needed the job. Depended on it. In order to do something useful for a change, I researched and compiled a very informative text for our website. It was about Brazil in general, the culture, history, politics, statistics, and advice on how to buy property in Brazil. Additionally, what people should pay attention to. Our second boss was impressed and wanted to bring the summary immediately on our homepage. Finally, a success. Furthermore, this thing would occupy me a few days, since my boss wanted it in all 4 languages. It was Tanya's birthday, so I walked over in the evening. Until then, no call had come from the bus driver. Too bad. A resident of the street informed me that Tanya and Marcio had gone away. Marcio's father had died. Somehow, I was quite relieved. At least I wouldn't risk of crossing jail's way. I feared that this was even worse for me, as to run into Leo on the road. Just before I returned into my street, I spotted a little puppy, not older than perhaps 1 or 2 months. He stank, was filthy of mud, and shivering as he was huddling in the middle of the road. Spontaneously, I took him in my arms and decided to take this ugly little creature home. First, I gave him a shower, and he cried like a baby, with a terrible shrilly sound. Since I was not at all prepared for a dog, I used my shampoo. He was full of fleas and gave me a very sick and weak impression. His skin seemed to be inflamed. Otherwise, it was just ugly, and resembled more a bat with its large spiky ears than a dog. Nevertheless, I decided to give this poor little creature a chance to live. Sampa, so I called him, in memory and full of nostalgia towards Sao Paulo, because I really did miss Sao Paulo. Sampa is an affectionate nickname for the city. Cost me in the following days and weeks not only a lot of money, which I had no more of, but also plenty of nerves. I bought dog shampoo, powder for skin, inflammation, calcium for teeth and bones, anti-inflammatory cream from the pharmacy, and of course puppy food. I also tried to teach him right from the start to be clean and to listen to his name Sampa. He responded after only a short time. Once I received my salary, I had him vaccinated and dewormed. I photographed him and showed my colleagues the photos of my baby. This caused general amusement, and I had to listen to comments like, "Put the photo on the website for the ugliest dog in the world. You will surely win a prize," and such alike. I stood firmly behind Sampa. Lovingly, I cared for him and had already decided that Sampa stayed with me. Every evening after work, I bathed him with a special soap that had to penetrate into the skin for a few minutes. For this, I wrapped him in an old towel and cuddled him in my arms. He then looked calm and loving in my eyes and won this way my heart. Nevertheless, he hated the bath like the plague and screamed his shrilly screams that my neighbors asked if I was having a cat now. No, it's a dog, even if it sounds like a cat. Although the bus driver did not call me, we flirted with each other every day somehow. It didn't lead anywhere, though. I wanted to go out at last, get to know Salvador. There had to be something other than those idiots here. My salary, however, wouldn't allow this. Long since the money of Wesley was used up, and I could just make ends meet with my salary. Where did the money go? I didn't know, only realized that Salvador is damn expensive. Especially Itinga, what seemed to me totally illogical, because Itinga is a place where predominantly poor people live. However, if I went to the supermarket with 50 reais, I came out again with 0. Sometimes I didn't even need to go to the supermarket. My money was simply vanishing. I could not make great purchases. More precisely, none. Sampa was, of course, an additional financial burden, with all the medicine I had to buy for him, and all else in addition, like leash, toys, etc. I was pretty depressed and frustrated. One of the great festivals in Brazil, São João, was on, and everyone celebrated everywhere. I spent alone at home, in bed. Not only lack of money. With whom should I have celebrated? All that Tanya and Marcio did was drink beer. That night, for once outside the house of Marcio's mother, where small fires were still burning, but more wasn't possible for them either. Both earned together as much as I did alone, and I seriously wondered how those people here made ends meet with those prizes. One of the street residents sat down with us and tried to force a conversation. I didn't want to know about these idiots here no more. Fabio, my colleague, explained to me the secret of the expensive prices in Itinga. It's quite clear why Itinga is more expensive than elsewhere. Since hardly anyone has a car, the residents are forced to make their shopping in Itinga. Therefore, the store owners add always on top. Those customers don't mind because they can buy in the stores on credit for a month or even longer, or pay by credit card. What an antisocial system! But in Brazil, everything is bought on credit, even clothes and shoes. Hardly anyone pays cash here, so I could keep up with nothing, because I had no CPF number, no bank account, and thus no credit card. I had quite simply no rights, only the duty to work, without working permit. On Monday morning, I tried to teach my Sampa to take food slowly and carefully out of my hand. That went awfully amiss, with this little savage chopping fully into my fingers with his sharp little milk teeth. He was bleeding like crazy. I was sure that I put me in serious danger if I did nothing about it. Nevertheless, I first went to work. My colleagues advised me to get urgently vaccinated against rabies, tetanus, etc. After all, Sampa was a street dog and could have anything in and on him. So I went voluntarily after work to the hospital of Itinga and asked for vaccination against rabies. Instead one, I got 12 injections, brutally, in my veins, upper arms, thighs and butt. They kept me up to 11 o'clock at night there and talked about I had to spend the night in the hospital. Everything was paining me, but in no case I would have stayed in hospital. I had to go home. Sampa was there alone and had to be fed, and I had to work early the next day. So I got in a nasty encounter with the entire staff on the ward. Because of possible allergic reactions to the vaccinations, they didn't want to let me go. Without me, I made a huge uprising until the head nurse was pissed off, finally, and almost threw me out. The allergic reactions came on Tuesday and stayed until Wednesday. I had a fever and severe pain. Nevertheless, I pulled myself up to meet my future husband, as well as my mother-in-law, together with Italva, who had organized them for me after it was pretty much sure that I would not have a chance for a visa or working permit. Thus it was said again I must marry. I liked both at once. Fabiano was a calm and sensible young man, shy but very intelligent. We agreed on 100 reais per month payment for his service. Should I decide, others required far more. The only way out, I had to somehow legalize my situation, and this was only possible with my marriage. Another damper, even here in Bahia, everything was going by the rule, at least officially, and if you don't have the wherewithal to bribe people, all documents, including Fabiano's, had to be approved in Germany. I learned during the telephone conversation with the Cartório registry office. I felt pretty rough, still being feverish, and on top of that had to endure the shit air condition. My only joy was Sampa, who for the first time played with his toys I had bought, romped around and even barked. Clear sign that he was feeling much better. and he now appeared better and healthier. The skin infections were almost gone. Only the ears were still heavily covered with scabs, and the puss left hard crusts again and again, which I regularly treated with a medical ointment. If I tried to remove the crust, the spots immediately began to bleed. Otherwise, he had already increased weight and now looked like a real puppy, clean, and his fur began to be shiny. I had almost made it nursing him. Meanwhile, he compensated even with an inevitable daily bath, but he was like me. It had to be warm water. Cold showers, sunbath, like as little as me. I was still worried, for he hardly drank water. My neighbor suggested that he still had worms.